Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
I'm Hillary Dickman, a parent of two and Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Colorado College.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. I have a few announcements and we'll dive into today's episode, but spring is here and it is just absolutely refreshing. Just the weather is it's spectacular. So I'm in great spirits. So friends, our Colorado gathering is now 2 weeks away. That's in Lafayette, Colorado at Centaurus High School. That's Wednesday, April 8th at 6 p.m. 4 different leaders from 4 different colleges, several who are on our podcast, Kate from Colorado, Hillary from Colorado College, and then Grace Robertson Lloyd, who's my interview from Grinnell College, a regional in the Denver market. And then we also have an Elon rep, and Allie McManaman from Elon University will also be joining us. You can sign up for that. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, go to the events tab, and you can't miss it. If someone wants to host a Baltimore gathering, Susan reached out to me and she said, it's 2 hours away, Mark. I'd love to come meet some listeners. So yeah, Susan's willing to come from Philly to Baltimore to attend, and we can do this on either May 16th or May 17th. I had interest this week in attending, but we need someone to host if we're going to do it. We don't have in our budget to rent out a facility. So we've done these in the past in lots of places. We've done them in schools. We've done them in girls' clubs, community centers. We've done them at restaurants. We've done them in apartment conference rooms. Just text me at 404-664-4340 if you want to host a gathering for Susan and I on May 16th or May 17th in the Baltimore area. Now, I did have a volunteer from the DC area, and I'll likely move in that direction if no one steps forward from the Baltimore area. Now, friends, there are a couple tasks for the podcast that I could use some help. And if you have some time on your hand and you want to help advance the podcast, I could use 2 volunteers. One is to reach out to specific people who I want to interview. Many cases you have requested we do these interviews, and we can provide the language for you. All this would be via email. I get solicited all the time by people trying to be spokespersons on behalf of somebody else to get on the podcast. So if that's something that you'd have interest in, please reach out. I also want us to kind of improve our sort of catalog of resources on the yourcollegeboundkid.com website right now. Sure, you can do a search with our search feature. And we also have tabs up for a lot of our interviews, but stuff gets missed. And I kind of have this vision of almost having more of a comprehensive glossary. Glossary is probably not the right word. More like, I'm thinking of it like a table of contents, but we just say, like, for example, I'm going to talk on Teacher Rex today, right? And so you could go in and see Teacher Rex and then have all the episodes beneath there with links. It's just a lot of work working on that. So if anybody is interested in helping with either of those projects, helping assemble the catalog of resources or sending some emails out to specific people for whom you have requested or I have strong interest in interviewing, just text me at 404-664-4340, or you could also email me at yourcollegeboundkid@gmail.com. Or many of you have my personal email. That's also fine. marketschoolmatch4u.com. Any of those ways you could reach me, it's fine. And friends, last week, a mom from Minnesota sent in a very heartwarming email with her permission to read it on the air. And it was basically her story and her husband's stories of their circuitous path to becoming doctors. And the point of it was, I'm the embodiment of it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. If you have a story like that, send it in, and there's a great chance I'll read it on the air. You can always protect your anonymity. But we're fighting upstream in this battle to convince people it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. And what people need are stories. Stories are powerful. You hear me say this all the time, right? Stories are personal, persuasive, interesting, memorable, and inspirational. So we need stories, and I'd love to share your story. Friends, YCBK Plus comes out this Tuesday, and if you're not getting YCBK Plus, just go to yourcollegemindkid.com, go to the About YCBK tab, and you can sign up there. It's our free newsletter that goes out monthly, and we kind of try to supplement the podcast by letting you know about some articles that are not behind paywalls that our listeners would like to know to stay current on what's going on in the world of college admissions or college. And normally what I like to do is to tell you the 10 articles that will be in the newsletter. But in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm running a little late on today's episode because I think I have a gardening addiction. I said, I'll go out there from like 7 to 9, then I'll work on putting the final touches on the podcast. Well, 7 to 9 became 7 to 1 p.m. because I just got caught up out there because spring is just the absolute best. And it's just kind of irresistible being out there in nature. I used to have this debate with Joy, my 27-year-old. And she would say fall's the best season. I would say spring. And the other day, we talk every Sunday. The other Sunday, she's like, Dad, I think I'm coming around to your view. So, yeah, spring is just the absolute best. And I'm getting this to you guys a little late. Of course, you'll still get it at the same time. But trust me, I have 10 great articles for you if you're not getting YCBK Plus. Go ahead and sign up for that. Once again, it's completely free. Friends, on today's episode, I'm going to give you 15 questions to ask to help you know which teacher to select when trying to select your teachers for Teacher Recs. The two biggest questions I'm getting right now in the counseling room is, who should I ask for my teacher recommendations? And can you help me with my course selection? They're due in a week or due in 2 weeks. Those are the two biggest questions I'm getting right now. And so it wasn't that long ago, we did do an interview segment with Heath Einstein less than a year ago from TCU, where we really went into Teacher Recs. Some of this you will have heard before. Some of it's going to be new in terms of what I'm going to share here. Speaking about Heath, I'm interviewing Heath again. Of course, he's one of our co-hosts. He comes on a few times a year. That's going to be the first week of April, and we're going to be talking about anything about resumes. So if you have a specific question that you would like Heath to answer about resumes, go to speakpipe.com/YCBK and leave that question before April 5th. Okay, so you've got less than 2 weeks. Get your question in by April 5th, and I'll have Heath answer it on the air. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about all things resumes because resumes are kind of complicated, right? I'm talking about college resumes, not work resumes, college admission resumes. So, if you've got a resume question, we'd love to answer it on the air. And speaking about questions from a listener, this is actually Question from a Listener Day, because after my 15 questions, then I'm going to give you tips to think about when it comes to who to select for Teacher Recs. You may recall 2 weeks ago, a listener sent in a Speakpipe question that was really addressed more to Hillary, had to do with unsubscribing from emails. And so Hillary has responded, so you're going to hear her response. And then in the final part, it's the final part of our tips for athletes, that interview that you've been hearing, so far with Katie and Amy and Joe and Reed. Well, just before I recorded that interview, it was like 3 days before, I said, if anybody has any questions, send a Speakpipe message. And we had a few come in. So I'm going to play a Speakpipe question. So actually one listener, but 3 very distinct questions. And our experts answered those. So you're going to get a lot of Speakpipe questions today. If you're a Speakpipe person, I think you might like this episode. But let's dive in with the 15 questions to ask when you're trying to decide who to select for your Teacher Recs. First of all, some schools don't want any recs. Some schools want 1. Some schools want 2. Some schools want 2, and you can do one other. Some schools want 2 and you can't do another. It's kind of complicated. That's not even talking about other recs. I'm talking about an additional teacher rec. And of course, there's the counselor rec. So there can be multiple recs in the file for some schools, or it can be none for another school. So what are the 15 questions? Once again, this is just strictly me. This is just how I answer this question when I'm asked it. I'm sharing it with you for your DIYers out there. DIYers, sorry. All right. First, do they know me? One of the pet peeves of admission officers is when they get a rec from a celebrity or somebody famous, and the person knows the parent. It's very clear. They hardly know you. I did admissions back in the days of paper apps, and I remember a faculty member, because we used a combination of admission officers and faculty members. Some schools do that. Some schools just use admission officers. We were one that did a combo. I remember a faculty member that literally wanted to rip up the rec. He was so hot. It was from a senator. So the question is not how well does the admission office know the rec writer. The question is how well does the rec writer know you? And it's a big mistake people make. They think going for the famous rec writer. Now, of course, teacher recs, you don't really have a choice. That tends to come in more with other recs, but it's the same principle. Do they know me? Remember, admission officers are professionals. They can tell. Very, very, very easy to tell the sense of the relationship with the student and the teacher, and how well the teacher knows the student knows the teacher. So that's one thing you want to ask yourself. Do they know me? Second, do they like me? AOs, admission officers, can tell. Is there an effusiveness in the way they write? Is there an enthusiasm in the way they write? That is very, very clear. And so when you're thinking about somebody, do they know me? Do they like me? Third, do they teach me in a core class? What am I talking about? Math, English, social studies, science, and foreign language. Those are the core classes. And that's really where the rec writing should come from. I know you love your film class. I know you love your visual arts class. I know you like your cooking class. That's not the place for you to select your rec writers. Next, a lot of schools have a very strong preference for the 11th grade. Why? 2 reasons. It's closer to when you matriculate, so there's a better sense that they're speaking to who you are now. And classes get harder. So part of the teacher rec is to get to know the person, but also to develop confidence that they'd be able to handle rigorous schooling. So 11th grade's more rigorous than 9th grade, and it's more recent. Strong preference for 11th. Now, that is not an absolute rule. I'd rather you have someone who knows you and likes you in 10th in a core class than someone that's kind of meh on you in 11th, right? So some of these things count more than others. But preference would be 11th. 11th that knows you and likes you and is in a core class. All right, next, are they a good communicator? I can read your minds. I know what you're thinking. How the heck do I know? Well, if you're at a private school, you might have teacher comments that schools send home, and you can look at how they write in the comments, or maybe there's been email communication from a teacher. But most people are not in private schools getting, regular comments 3 times a year. So, rule of thumb, if they're a good speaking communicator, they're probably good writing communicator. And remember, schools aren't expecting Shakespeare here anyway. But it is a question, are they a good communicator? Somebody who's a very good communicator versus somebody that's not. Once again, admission officers only know what they read, so it can impact the impression. Next, are they reliable, dependable? Nothing's worse than you having to constantly send reminders to your rec writer who committed to do this months ago, that the deadline's here or quickly approaching, and there's no evidence that the rec has been written. Reliable, dependable. Next, is my major of interest correlated to an academic subject? Okay, so for example, let's say you are expressing interest in being a historian. Well, it'd be great if you could have a history writer do one of the recs rather than the chem teacher. You tell me you want to be major in applied math, meaning you tell the colleges that. Be kind of nice to see what a math teacher has to say about you. Now, This is more important if a college admits by major or if they admit by division of studies than if they have the open door policy I talked about last week and they just admit into the college at large. So the more major plays a role, either admit by major, admit by division of studies, the more it's nice to have a teacher lined up with your major. Now understand something. There's a lot of college majors that are not directly correlated to a subject, and then you're free. But there are some, and there are quite a few that are. All right, next. Left brain, right brain, right? What does that mean? If you're getting 2 recs, ideally one's math science and one's English, social science, foreign language, or humanities one. Now, there are schools that just explicitly come right out and tell you this is what we want. MIT does that. Caltech does that. Harvey Mudd does that. Very few schools do that. There are other schools that indicate a preference for this, like Williams and Amherst. But there are many other schools that don't put that in writing because they don't want it to be an impediment to you finding a rec writer. They don't want to add stress to the process. But it would be a preference. It would be ideal. So once again, I would not compromise on do they know me? Do they like me? Is this a core class to shoot for this? But in an ideal world, if you can, I did a session with a student this week, and it was, part of, maybe it was last week, it's part of my impetus to do this session. And he's like, I want to know who to select. And so we went through every one of his options, and my goodness, he had great options. He literally had 5 great options. And so, and that's not normal, by the way. But in his case, he literally could afford to do this math science, English, humanities, foreign language, social sciences, and not compromise his quality at all. So this is, once again, this is the ideal. Next, is it a rigorous class? Now, part of the reason for the 11th preference, as I mentioned, is it's harder than a 9th grade class, right? But all things being equal, a more rigorous 11th grade class would be better than a less rigorous class. Now, one mistake students make is they think they have to go for the class where they got the hardest grade. That's not something that you need to do. Yeah, don't have to go for where you got your highest grade, right? In fact, sometimes when there's been some struggle in there and you've shown the ability to surmount that struggle, that can make a great rec. So you're not going to hear that in here. Go for the grade that was your highest, that came the easiest to you. But is the class more rigorous? Yeah, that's something that would be good. If I was just deciding between 2 classes, all things being equal, I'm going to go for the more rigorous one. All right, this is the one that I think is important and one that I really never hear talked about. Are they open to sitting down with me and having a conversation with them about my application? Okay, this is important on a lot of levels. It speaks to your comfort level with the teacher that you could even do this. But it also gives you an opportunity to provide a little bit of guidance to the teacher so that they can bring out things that are going to make you pop. Okay, very, very, very important. And that leads to my next point, and I'll kind of meld the two because some of you may be wondering, well, what do I say in this? Was I distinctive enough in this class that the writing has a chance to be compelling and not just competitive? It has a chance to be a superlative rec. So when I'm working with my students, I give them a form, I give them a document, and I'm just going to hit on some highlights from it. But what you're doing is you're asking for an example where I have demonstrated excellence in a few of the following areas, and could you just share a 1 or 2 or 3 sentence anecdote on it? What are the areas? Love of learning, class participation, how I work in groups, whether I seek out extra help, whether I've shown grit or persistence, whether I've shown positive leadership, whether I've demonstrated integrity, whether I've helped other classmates, how I've grown as a person or a scholar since you met me. What do you feel I'm distinctively good at? What am I unique at in a good way? Anything that only you know about me that you think would help an admission officer to understand me better. If you could share stories, not paragraph stories, 1-2 sentence stories, 3-sentence max stories, where I've demonstrated excellence in any of those areas. That's what I mean when I say, was I distinctive in the class? And that's what I mean about sitting down and having a conversation, because that's ultimately is going to make you pop and come alive and make your application come to life and have that inspirational quality that the best applications have. Next, is there any third-party substantiation that this person's a good rec writer? That could be a school counselor, could be a college counselor, could be talking with upperclassmen or peers. Is there any third-party substantiation? That's our next point. All right. Next, when you ask the rec writer, and I'm strongly in favor of asking them verbally, not in writing, how do they react? So a number of co-hosts have asked me at some point to do a recommendation for them. Julia, Susan, Linda, Lisa, Kevin, they all come to mind. When they asked me, it's almost as if they were doing me a favor. Meaning I was so excited to write on their behalf, I did it with enthusiasm. So when you ask for the rec, just be quiet and see how they respond. Maybe another time I'll go more in depth on how to ask, but just be quiet and see how they respond. There should be enthusiasm. There should not be any hesitance whatsoever. And it should not be a tepid meh response, because you need that level of enthusiasm going to the paper when they write. All right. A couple more. And one thing I really want to emphasize, I don't want you to think I need to have every single one of these things. Some of them count more than others. And the last two I'm going to mention here, they're just ideal. They're not in any way, shape, or form requirements. But it's something that I think students don't think about enough. So this is the first of those. Has the teacher taught me twice? So let's say a teacher had you in 10th and then again in 12th. Like, that is very powerful. They can speak to your growth as a person and a scholar. That's that do they know me well. Admission officers love to get the teacher that's taught the person twice and can talk about change and growth and perspective. Once again, not a requirement, but a question I'd ask myself when I'm thinking about who to ask, right? And then the last one is, do they know me outside of the classroom, not just in the classroom? Maybe they're also a coach or a choir director, or they're an advisor to a club or a service project or study abroad. If they know you outside the classroom, maybe you babysat for their kids one time. That is a really nice perspective that can get incorporated, and it elevates their words because, the readers think, oh, this teacher, Miss Jackson, really knows, Timothy. Once again, you don't have to have all of these. They're not all equal, but it's a question I'm getting asked all the time. So I thought I would share it with you guys as you try to walk through that decision of who am I going to choose for my teacher recs. By the way, another question people ask is, when do you ask? Now. If you're in a busy school, February. You don't want the teacher to say, I do 15 every year, and I'm sorry, but I've already committed to 15 or 10 or whatever their number is. So I tell people February to April, the busier the school, meaning if it's a more college competitive environment, like February. Just play it safe. You don't have to go over that. That's not when you do everything at once. Like, I like more of a two-step process. Secure the commitment now, and then sit down later with them at some time and kind of go over things, the things that I was talking about earlier. You can do that more toward the end of the year, like May. So, friends, hopefully this was helpful. Let's transition now to the question that was asked to Hillary, and we'll hear her response.
Hello, Mark and team. You guys are fabulous. Thank you so much for everything you do. Hillary mentioned that when a parent unsubscribes, that it will cause the student to be unsubscribed somewhere in the funnel. If there's a way you could verify when that is that after the student's been admitted, or is that earlier in the process? That'd be great. Take care. Thanks.
Hey, this is Hillary. Thanks so much for that question. So the caller asked, at what point in the funnel can a parent unsubscribing from a student email unsubscribe the student. And let me make clear, this only happens if the parent is carbon copied on an email to the student. So if we send out an email announcing that we're having an admitted student open house, or telling the student, hey, you're missing some financial aid documents or something like that, and we carbon copy the parents on it, if the parents say, oh, I'm tired of getting emails from this college, I'm going to unsubscribe, it will unsubscribe the student. It doesn't matter what part of the funnel they're in. They could be a brand new, sophomore inquiry. They could be an admitted student. If the student has multiple email addresses with us, then that will just unsubscribe that one email address and we will move to their next email address. I think that's how it works in Slate. So it doesn't matter where you are in the funnel. It can happen at any point. So if you want to unsubscribe from a school's emails, the better thing to do would first be to check, is this coming directly to me or am I carbon copied? If it's coming directly to you, you can unsubscribe and it'll just unsubscribe you. It won't unsubscribe your student. If you're CC'd on the email, the better thing to do would be to respond or to email the general email address, like admission@coloradocollege.edu or whatever college you're trying to get a hold of, and let them know that you no longer want to receive emails from them, and they can remove the parent record from that student's record so that you don't get more email. I hope that helps.
All right, friends, it's time for the final part of my interview with Student Athlete Advisors.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we've reached the final segment of our interview on tips to help you with the recruiting process if you want to play your sport at the varsity level. And our 4 experts, Katie, Amy, Joe, and Reed, answer 3 questions that one listener sent in via Speakpipe. In part 4 of 4, we talk about NIL and college athletics. We also discuss the difference between the time sports and the observation sports. And we'll let you know about some of the resources that Student Athlete Advisors have available and how you can partner with Student Athlete Advisors as a college counselor, as a student, or a parent. Listen and enjoy. So who wants to take, the first of our questions that came in? Friends, I mentioned in our preview that we did have a Speakpipe question came in specifically for our 4 experts. And let me go ahead and play the question, then we'll get the response.
Hi, Mark and team. My questions about athletic recruiting are in a couple of areas. The first is around prep school programs where students are doing a lot of moving around or going to a prep school basketball program for 1 year and that sort of thing, and kind of what role they play, how successful they are in getting kids placed. Related is post-grad years. Some of these same schools offering post-grad years. The second area I have interest is international students. I've noticed that some rosters at schools have 0 international students while other schools are open to them. And what drives that? Is that just school policy? Is it coach's preference, etc.? And the third piece is around differences and changes by sport. So with NIL being introduced, how has that changed some sports more than others? Limits being placed on rosters for what had previously been really large sports like football. How is that changing things? Is hockey the only sport where students seem to go to the juniors and, play kind of outside the college system before then trying to get into a D1 program? And is that considered a gap year? Should they be applying as a senior if that's what they want to do? Any and all of those topics are of great interest to me. Thank you so much.
I can throw my feet in the fire on that to at least start with. I think when you think about post-grad years, prep years, anything like that, I think the main thing to keep in mind there is that it is, in the broadest sense, it's just another roll of the dice, right? I think a lot of people assume that if you go to these different organizations or these different groups, they sell you on the idea that, they send all these kids to these schools or they have these outputs or whatever it might be. And that's all well and good. It's all contingent on do you have a pre-existing relationship with a coaching staff that knows you're doing this and is interested in you doing this for another year of development or going to a particular institution for specific development? And or are you going to grow and mature and improve during that time that you're there to the degree that whatever this coach or future coaches that you want to gain the interest of are interested in you, right? I mean, postgraduate years, prep student, they can give you more opportunity. They can give you more time to develop. They can give you more time to grow. But you're going to be who you're going to be. You're going to go to the gym. You're going to work out. You're going to do what you do. And if I have a rower who takes a gap year and their time doesn't drop, you're not going to expect a lot of difference when it comes to who's going to respond to them. Now, if you go there and you drop 10 seconds on your 2K time, now all of a sudden we have a different conversation, and that worked for you. And so I think you can, for kids that are young, for kids that feel like they need more development, for kids that think they might need a different environment, or they're being instructed by a school that they really love and have a great relationship with, that this could be a viable option. That's a great thing to explore and to understand from a personal level. But by no means is it a golden ticket, if you will, to being able to play somewhere in college. It's simply another roll of the dice.
I know there was a question about internationals too. I remember that.
Yeah, that was the second question is why she's noticed that there's a lot of international students popping up on some rosters, but not others. And what is the mechanics of that? Is it coaching preference? Is it, I could tackle that one if you guys want to. Yeah, for international students, a lot of it comes down to the sport, the specific sport, and the specific coaching staff. You look through a lot of sports, women's golf and men's soccer, where there's these incredibly large pools of talent outside of the U.S. They're really pulling a lot from those pools and leaving a lot less room for your average American high school student, in the same way that we were talking about earlier with the transfer portal and things like that. So it's one way that similar to what we were saying earlier is, if you go look at rosters, you can see who is pulling from where. You can see, if you look and see the school that you're interested in going to has 80% of their athletes are from Sweden and Norway and China and Eastern Europe, then it's like, oh man, it's going to be even harder for me as a kid in Iowa to, get recruited by these people, because the mechanics of it is these coaches are going for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time around the world and recruiting out there because that's where they see the value. In the same way that if you see a roster with 60% of their people transferring back from a Division I school to the University of Tampa, you're like, okay, this is kind of the pool that they're swimming in. So a lot of it comes down to the coach's preference and where they're going to spend their time and their money in the recruiting world. The next one is about NIL and roster limits going on.
Reed, do you want to take that one?
The hockey question was, hockey is unique in, kids going to juniors for a couple of years, then coming back to college. Why is that? And then are there any other sports where that, is that just a hockey thing? Or are there any other sports?
Hockey is uniquely unique in my opinion. I don't know of other sports that fall under that world. Hockey's been different for a while, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Canadian juniors and the junior leagues in hockey was prevalent sort of in conjunction with the NCAA. It was never necessarily, junior hockey was where you found opportunity for ice hockey. It wasn't in the NCAA, and only recently has the NCAA sort of had a resurgence, given the fact that students that could usually go and play junior hockey and get billeted by families and have certain things paid for and almost have a quasi semi-professional experience now have the option to do that and then also attend the NCAA, still maintain a level of potential income, money, scholarship, whatever it might be, and still then be eligible for the draft or whatever that might look like. There's such a small community of ice hockey teams that exist in the NCAA compared to other sports that junior hockey just kind of had its own world. And now that the Canadian junior teams are able to compete in the NCAA, those sort of semi-professional amateurism issues are no longer issues, thanks to name, image, and likeness. If anything, it's once again just kind of shortened the funnel for the number of kids domestically that are available to go. But hockey is weird, and I think they're okay to admit that when it comes to their relationship with the NCAA.
Do we cover them all?
Yeah, that was the last one.
Are you finding, NIL is trickling down outside of the big revenue producing sports? I mean, are you hearing it from, sports that aren't the revenue producing sports. Oh, what are you offering me? Or so and so says they're offering this, or is it only for rock stars? Because sometimes I'll hear crazy stuff, but it's more unique. Like there's a gymnast at LSU that's making insane amounts of money, but she also has like, crazy social media followers. So I know that's more of a one-off. What are you really pretty much seeing that only mostly in the basketball, football realm, or do you see it also with baseball, hockey, any other sports? Because here in Georgia, you probably know this, it's trickling down into high school football.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Absolutely. But it's there. It exists. But the Reed can definitely share. I mean, the bulk of NIL money is definitely going to football and basketball.
Yeah, Reed, do your thing on.
Yeah, when it comes to NIL, I mean, once again, college sports nowadays it's a money-making endeavor for schools, or it's an attempt to be a money-making endeavor for schools, I should say. And the easiest way to do that is through football and through basketball. And so where they can put that money in and get that money back out through admissions, marketing, whatever it might be, the vast majority of schools are going to do that. And that's where you're going to hear about the largest deals. That's where the largest percentage of that NIL income is going towards. You can see it in multiple different, my alma mater, University of Texas, there's conversations of, we've got a $40 million roster for football, which is a preposterous thing to say out loud. But we talk about NIL in the same way that we talk about admissions, to say that 90% of the articles that so many of us read are about Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Cornell, the Ivy Leagues. And that accounts for what? 1%,
Sure.
a percent of a percent of the kids that are actually going.
Yeah.
We do the same thing in NIL, right? We extrapolate and we expand and we really key in on these kind of amazing numbers that we hear in these very specific sports and in these very specific conferences. That's not to say, like Amy referenced, that NIL deals are not happening. But generally, those are going to be more drawn by an individual's performance or an individual's brand. So you mentioned the LSU gymnast. You're probably referring to Libby Dunn. She had 1 million followers on Instagram before she ever showed up to LSU.
Yeah.
So it wasn't NIL that made her that money. It was her. It was simply the fact that she can now monetize that brand that she's built whilst also competing at LSU. And so you find that with a lot of students where they're coming in with their own personal brands, their own YouTube channels, whatever it might be, and they're integrating that into what they're doing in college, and we're calling it NIL because that's the way that they're getting paid for it. When it comes to pay for play in the sports setting, which NCAA claims that they don't do, and they don't pay for play, but there's a lot of things that get claimed. That's going to be more towards revenue generating sports, only because they can see a return on that investment from a sports perspective.
And I would, throw on there, like, we like you were saying, we focus on these huge deals and all these different things. And Reed always puts up a chart that says, like, once you get rid of football and you get rid of basketball, and the average NIL deal is like $185 a year or something like that. But I would also say, if you just kind of shift perspective a little bit, as a broke Division II baseball player, like $185 would have been phenomenal for me back in the day. And, I just think about, like, if I could have made an NIL deal with the local Pizza Hut or the Little Caesars, it was back in the day, where if we got a free $5, hot and ready once a week for posting on Instagram, oh my God, that would have been a game changer, And so, and the other piece too is that if you work with a lot of athletes like we do, a lot of them are aspiring business students, And so what a great opportunity to understand marketing and to understand deal making and finance and things like that. If you're going out and you're making a $200, deal with somebody, and then, but then you also have to be very careful with, the deals that are being made. And there's a lot of predation of athletes out there, and there's not a lot of protection. And I know, Reed could talk about a lot of examples of, ways that people have gotten themselves into trouble as well.
I want to, for my last question, I really want to come back to something that came up earlier, but I think it's really important. So there is the distinction between your sports where a time or an external review leads to a certain level of credibility right away in recruiting, right? Like, I know for me right away, I immediately think of like track and field, tennis, swimming, golf. rowing with the 2K, like immediately you have a stat, you have a UTR, or you have a score on the golf course, or obviously track and swimming are just really clear, 50 free time or 100-meter time or something, versus very different, more of the spectator team sport, right? Field hockey, lacrosse, baseball, football, squash. I mean, where it's going to take some type of observation and evaluation. That's not even getting into the character evaluation or the academic evaluation, but just strictly are you good enough to come in here and contribute? And are there any other sports besides track, tennis, rowing, golf, and swimming that come to mind that sort of like, okay, you've got a number and that in of itself can get some attention versus it's going to be more of a comprehensive observation evaluation?
I think you could add fencing to that. There's a ranking system there that depending on your weapon and the competitions you go to and your ranking in the nation and internationally definitely makes a difference. And it's a small world, right?
Yeah.
Fencing is a very small world.
Yeah, but it can definitely help. I was talking to somebody I didn't work with. I met them through somebody else I worked with at a graduation party. And in talking to them, I found out both kids went to Princeton, which catches your attention because that's not that easy to do. But they joined a fencing club in 6th grade and were able to really distinguish themselves. And I mean, it really can make a difference at certain schools coming in with a talent that they want in between getting in and not getting in. Like, students can't do this. If your heart's not in it, it's not going to work. You can't just say, oh, let me play a sport. If you don't have the passion and the love for it or the talent, it won't work. But I know you guys all see it. Like, it can make a very big difference especially at these really competitive spots where they have so many people banging down the door and they're saying, okay, who's going to come in here and add value? So in closing, why don't we just talk about how, if someone's listening and they're interested in your services, what would be their next step? And we do have a lot of college counselors who listen, and they might be interested in maybe setting up some time to talk about how you partner with college counseling, and then there could be an individual that might want to work with you. So why don't we just give you that form in closing to share that?
Wonderful. I'll address that. So we do work with, as I mentioned before, lots of different types of, we partner with college counselors. We work individually with families. So the easiest way to reach us is to go to our website, thestudentathleteadvisors.com, and go to the Contact Us page. And there you will see a jumping off point for whoever you are. If you're a family, or if you're an athletic, or if you're a college counselor, fill out the form that will then come to us, and we can, again, it goes into sort of our system, and that will assign one of us to you, and then we can decide on the backside if we think whoever got assigned would be, someone else would be a better fit. We can kind of reorganize internally, and then one of us will reach out to you. So either way, whether you're a family or a college counselor, we're happy to do that. And our website has all of those options on it.
And we'll make sure the website's in the show notes. Joe?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We also have courses. We have, for counselors, we have comprehensive, you want to learn more about working with student athletes, here's 8 modules. I can't even remember how much content it is, but it's a lot. And then we have sports specific courses dedicated to counselors to supplement that. And then we also have direct to, families like, hey, we want to, do this on our own, but we need a little bit of guidance, sport specific courses that are directed at families.
No, thanks for sharing that. Those courses might be really appealing. And, a lot of times when people hear the idea of independent educational counselors, they, once again, what gets all the news are the splashy people that charge outrageous amounts of money. I can tell you, I've talked with Katie, and they're not going to turn around and say, "Give us $50,000 if you want to work with us," right? So they're very reasonable compared to what you'll see out there, and I just want to throw that out there because that can be a misperception sometimes, as prices can be literally all over the place. You guys know that. So this has been fantastic. For those of you who are in Counselors Connect, you're going to get to hear from student athlete advisors in the fourth Sunday of February. They'll come and answer your questions and speak to you. I'm very excited about that. And I just really appreciate you guys coming on here. And you actually, well, I can't completely do it. So we have a policy. No first-time guest ever comes on here without going on the hot seat. You're saved a little bit by the fact that I have a meeting in 6 minutes, but I have to ask at least one question. So I'll throw it out there and see who wants to answer it. So here's my question. What do you wish your 18-year-old self knew?
Reed, I feel like this is your. I feel like you are the one.
As the one out of the group who went to 5 different schools in 4 years, I probably could have learned a lot from myself. I think coming from the student athlete background, and these 3 have heard me say this a few times, one of the things that we try and instill with all of our kids, and what I wish I would have told myself, was sport is part of who you are. It's not who you are, and that's a lot of what we try to bring when we work with families as well. Sports are amazing. They bring so many things into our lives. We want them to be a part of our college experience if at all possible, but it has to work with what we want. It has to work with where we want to be. It has to work with who we want to be around. It has to work with how we're going to grow into the next phase of our lives. And if you let sports drive the entirety of this process, it's a really, really risky operation. Whereas if you bake it into what you want overall in a college experience, which is what we all try to do with our kids or whoever it is we're working with or partnering with, that's where you find kids that are really getting the most out of their college experience and using sports as a vehicle to continue to succeed in college and not as a crutch to keep them floating in college, rather. So I wish I would have told myself that sports is a part of who you are. It is not who you are, and your college choices need to reflect that.
Thank you. And something I just want to say, you said this earlier, but it's really important. So most people listening who have athletes probably have D3 athletes, just more likely, just the numbers. And for D3 or high-level D1, like, Katie at Duke, Amy at Emory, those conferences, that academic piece has got to be there. It's got to be there. There's going to be a level of screening right away. And if you're not, within academic range, they're not going to admit you because you're a really good athlete. Now, Duke's basketball might be an exception, but that's very rare, right? And so keep those grades up and keep working hard in school, because there's plenty of kids that don't get opportunities, especially at those D3s, just because you're not an academic fit. So I'll close with that. But thank you guys so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the end of February at our Counselor Connect meeting.
Thank you.
On Thursday's episode, Carter will join me to answer a question from a listener. Barbara Camus will have the second part and the final part of her interview on how the language we use is so important and how students hear it differently than we think they do, and it can be detrimental to their mental health. And then we'll have part 2 of 3 of my spotlight with Grace Robertson Lloyd, a regional from Grinnell College stationed in Denver. Friends, it's decision time, and you know what that means. I'm trying to sear, I'm trying to emblazon, I'm trying to penetrate your mind. I want this aphorism to just ring and ring and ring like a bell over and over and over again. And what is it? It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there and what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career success. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpike.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.